No one ever walks into a billionaire's office without permission. But that morning, two children did. And with a single question, they shattered a life built on power, wealth, and silence. Rain fell like judgment that morning, heavy and unforgiving, washing the streets of the city but cleansing nothing. In the forgotten district near the old factories, two children walked without umbrellas, their shoes soaked, their clothes clinging to thin bodies hardened by years of survival. Eli, 13, walked slightly ahead, shoulders tense, jaw set. He had learned long ago that fear only slowed you down. Beside him was his sister, Mara, 10, clutching a small plastic folder to her chest as if it were made of glass. Inside it were papers older than both of them, documents their mother had hidden under floorboards, wrapped in cloth, guarded like a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. "Are you sure this is the place?" Mara asked, her voice trembling more from doubt than cold. Eli looked up at the skyline. Glass towers rose like monuments to people who never worried about rain. One tower stood taller than the rest, its name engraved in steel letters visible even from the street. Kingsley Global. "Yes," Eli said. "This is it." They had grown up in shelters, back rooms, and borrowed corners of the city. After their mother died, the world had moved on quickly, efficiently, cruelly. There were condolences, paperwork, and then silence. No one asked where the children went. No one checked if they ate, except for one thing their mother had left behind. On her last night, weak and fading, she had grabbed Eli's wrist with surprising strength. "If anything happens to me," she whispered, "you go to him. Don't beg. Don't threaten. Just ask him one question." "What question?" Eli had asked through tears. She smiled sadly. "He'll know." Now, standing before the building's massive glass doors, Eli felt the weight of that promise crushing his chest. Guards in dark uniforms stood near the entrance, their eyes scanning the street, trained to spot danger, not children. Mara hesitated. "What if they send us away?" Eli reached for the door. "Then we come back." They stepped inside. The lobby swallowed them whole. Marble floors, soft lighting, the smell of wealth and control. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Two soaked children didn't belong here. A receptionist stood abruptly. "Can I help you?" Eli lifted his chin. "We need to see the CEO." She blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Eli said, but he's been expecting this question for years. The guards moved closer. Mara's fingers tightened around the folder. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, destiny had just crossed the threshold. At the top of the tower, Daniel Kingsley stood by his office window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the city shrink beneath him. At 42, he was everything magazines admired: brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. A man who had turned ambition into empire. Yet lately, sleep had abandoned him. His office was immaculate. Dark wood, leather chairs, awards framed like trophies of conquest. Every object reflected control. Every silence was intentional. "Sir," his assistant said cautiously, stepping inside. "There's a situation downstairs." Daniel didn't turn. "Define situation." "Two children. They insist on seeing you. Security will handle it." "They already tried," she said. "The children refuse to leave. The boy says he has a question only you can answer." Daniel frowned. He hated interruptions, hated surprises. Yet something in her tone unsettled him. "Send them up," he said before he could reconsider. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Daniel turned. The first thing he noticed was the boy's posture. Defensive, protective. The second was the girl's eyes. And then his chest tightened. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. "Who are you?" Daniel asked, his voice colder than he felt. The boy stepped forward. "My name is Eli. This is my sister, Mara. What do you want?" Eli swallowed. "We just want to ask a question." Daniel gestured to the guards. "Leave us." They hesitated. Now, when the doors closed, the room felt too large, too quiet. Mara stared at the office, at the paintings, the view, the wealth she had only seen on television. "Do you live here?" she asked softly. Daniel ignored her. His eyes stayed on Eli. "Ask your question." Eli reached into his jacket, but stopped. He looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "Did you ever love a woman named Elena Moore?" The name hit like a buried blade. Daniel staggered back slightly, his composure cracking for the first time in years. "How do you know that name?" he demanded. Mara stepped forward, tears forming. "She was our mother." Silence crashed into the room. Daniel's mind flooded with memories. Laughter in a tiny apartment, plans whispered late at night, promises he never kept. He had walked away when success demanded sacrifice. "I didn't know," he whispered. Eli's voice shook. "She died thinking you chose money over us." Daniel looked at the children again, not as intruders, but as consequences. "Why are you here?" he asked. Eli placed a folder on the desk. "Because we need the truth," he said. "And because she told us you would recognize it when you saw us." Daniel stared at the folder as though it might explode. His name was written across the front in his own handwriting, older, careless, from a time when he thought life could be postponed. He opened it. Medical records. Letters. A dated consent form he barely remembered signing. His hands trembled. Mara broke the silence. "Before she died, she told us not to hate you. She said if we ever found you, we should only ask one thing." Daniel's throat tightened. "What thing?" Eli took a breath that felt like it might be his last. "Are you our father?" The question echoed through the office, louder than any boardroom argument Daniel had ever won. "No," Daniel said instinctively, shaking his head. "That can't be true." But doubt had already entered. "Then prove it," Eli replied. "That's all we're asking." Daniel turned away, staring at the city again, as if the answer might be written in the streets below. For years, he had buried that chapter of his life under contracts and profits. Now it stood before him, soaked in rain and desperation. "A DNA test," Daniel said finally. "If we do this, you accept the result. Whatever it is." Eli nodded. "We already have." The test was arranged that same hour. As they waited, Daniel watched the children closely. Eli barely sat down, alert, protective. Mara explored the office quietly, touching nothing, afraid to break something she could never afford to replace. "You're hungry," Daniel said suddenly. Mara hesitated, then nodded. Food arrived, more than they'd ever seen at once. Mara ate carefully. Eli barely touched his plate. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Daniel asked. Eli's voice was flat. "Because we hoped you weren't the answer." Days passed like years. Daniel found himself pacing, checking his phone, replaying every memory of Elena he had tried to forget. He realized something terrifying. If the result was positive, he had failed for over a decade. When the doctor finally called, Daniel put the phone on speaker. "Mr. Kingsley," the voice said calmly, "the results are conclusive. Probability of paternity is 99.8%. The room went silent. Mara looked at Eli. "What does that mean?" Eli swallowed hard. "It means the answer is yes." Daniel collapsed into his chair. For the first time in his life, no amount of money could fix what he had lost. Daniel didn't speak for a long time. He simply sat there, staring at the children who carried his blood, his eyes, his mistakes. Every award on the wall felt like an accusation. "I didn't know," he said finally, his voice breaking. "If I had," Eli cut him off. "You chose not to know." The word stung because they were true. Mara looked up at him. "Does this mean we have a home now?" The simplicity of the question shattered him. Daniel stood. "You already should have." That night, Daniel went to the orphanage where Eli and Mara had been staying. He saw the cracked walls, the overcrowded rooms, the way children learn not to cry because no one came. The director recognized him instantly. "Mr. Kingsley, if we had known." "You should have," Daniel said quietly. He funded the orphanage on the spot, but the money felt small compared to what he owed. At the mansion, Eli refused the guest room. "We're not guests," he said. "Either we stay or we leave." Daniel nodded. "You stay." But presence was harder than payment. Mara woke from nightmares. Eli tested boundaries. Daniel struggled to learn how to be something he had never practiced, available. The media exploded when the story leaked. Headlines screamed. Investors panicked. Daniel resigned temporarily as CEO. "Family," he told the board, "isn't a liability. It's a responsibility." For the first time, he meant it. Months passed. Slowly, the mansion softened. Laughter replaced echoes. Mistakes were made. Apologies followed. Eli began to trust, not fully but enough. Mara started calling Daniel Dad by accident, then on purpose. One evening, they sat on a balcony watching the city lights. "Why didn't you come looking for us?" Eli asked. Daniel didn't lie. "Because I was afraid of what I'd find." Mara leaned against him. "Are you still afraid?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Every day. But I'm here." He reopened the investigation into the factory that killed Elena. People were held accountable. Truth surfaced. Power, Daniel learned, meant nothing without courage. Years later, Eli stood in the same lobby where he once arrived, soaked and afraid. This time in a suit, confident, unafraid. Mara laughed beside him. Daniel watched them with quiet pride. "Do you remember the question you asked me?" Daniel said. Eli nodded. "I remember the answer." Mara smiled. "It changed everything." Daniel looked at his children, the greatest legacy he never planned. Two orphans had walked into his office with nothing but truth. And in doing so, they taught a billionaire what wealth really was.